You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.
As we keep on rolling. But first, allow me now to welcome on the flowiest of Flowmasters. He hasn't been on in quite some time. Pleased to have him back. Mr. Henry Schwartz, the creator of Trade Alert, now part of the ever-expanding SIBO data empire. Mr. Schwartz, welcome to our election night spectacular, sir.
Thank you, Mark. I'm excited to be here. This is my first election night spectacular with you. And it's an exciting one.
It certainly is an exciting one. A lot to analyze here, a lot to get going here as we bring on some of our other special guests here. All right, let's just make sure everyone's good. Like I said, I mentioned we're here, we're good until all right. We've got some tech issues for one of our guests, so we'll get him on in a little bit. Meanwhile, though, let's start with the man who has the plan, a.k.a. all the data, Mr. Flowmaster. A lot to unpack. This has got to be just like Christmas morning for a guy like you. So much popping off, so much changing, a lot to analyze. What's lighting up your tape? What's blowing up your door over there at Trade Alert right now, sir?
Well, I've been very, very busy trying to make sense of the moving target, which really has been this, the market setup into today. I wrote a paper and, about 6 weeks ago, and, the term structure was one way, and you had, about 4 extra points of premium in the November futures. And then I think by the time they published it, most of that was gone. But then it kind of came back. So, I guess if you wait long enough, everything is true. So we've been very busy, watching everything. I have not heard anybody talking about, but, I was talking to somebody today who mentioned it is, besides just how much is the market going to move, right? And everybody's focused on SPY and SPX. You have some single stocks that have unique sensitivities to how things go. The couple examples, and so what I was doing basically was trying to run kind of a event gap estimation for today or tomorrow, the same way you do for earnings, right? And a couple of things that jumped out at me, Lyft and Uber, because of a ballot proposition in California that might reclassify drivers as employees. Both of those, when you look at kind of the short-term vol versus the 10-day vol, you're talking about 50 points higher or so in the near term, which works out to moves in the 15 to 20% range for both of those names in the next couple of days. If you believe what the kind of the way the straddles are pricing, the other side of that is, I guess it could be spectacular. I saw one of the very last trades today was a straddle buyer in Uber, short-term straddle, less than a minute to the close. I think they paid $4.20 for a 50 lot or so of at-the-money straddles. Now, this is a $36 stock, right? So that's telling you something. They think it's going to move at least $4 in the next couple of days. So, other things that kind of are setting up the same way. The marijuana names, right? There's been a lot of talk about that because if there's a blue sweep, you may see kind of more efforts on the federal level to legalize pot, and then and then healthcare names. So there's all sorts of really interesting things out there. The other thing that I heard earlier this week was from an interdealer broker was that that some of the big liquidity providers were, you'll like this, Mark, basically turning off their screens and saying, yeah, we're just going to kind of sit back now, and because they liked the way they were positioned and they didn't want to get put into anything funky, kind of right into the event. So, this year, I could talk all night about volume and volatility because it's been that kind of year. But we did pass the 6 billion contract mark in volume about 6 or 7 days ago. So I think earlier this year I said we'd be over 7 billion, and there's no way that we're not hitting it. So it's exciting and stressful at the same time.
Very exciting indeed. It's also exciting whenever we can add to our growing list of compatriots here on our election all-star special. But while we're adding on more people, Mr. Grams, I know you have to go off and analyze your own trades and prepare maybe some more multi-product, let's say 30 product videos. So before you go do that, Dan, you want to leave our audience with any final nuggets or pearls of wisdom? Have at it, sir.
Well, I would just say the action that we've seen so far, and again, this is from a price action point of view. If you look at the stock indices, we had that rally, like we talked about with the S&P, got near that 3,400, have backed off. And right now, the market really seems in a very neutral position. We're not seeing any strength to the upside or to the downside. So to go sideways here, unless we get some fresh, clean news coming out, I would expect that to continue and probably through the European session. So it's really going to be interesting to see not only what our stock indices do, but the yield curve, the currencies, the energy market, metals. There's some interesting things still to look at before the day is done. But I just want to thank you very much for letting me participate today. Great being on here with everyone. I really enjoyed hearing all your thoughts and comments. A very wise group of people to have a chance to spend some time with. So thank you all. And thank you, Mark.
Thanks for coming on, Dan. Your wisdom, as always, is appreciated here as you're breaking down all those legions of markets. If you haven't done so already, check them out. Dan Gramza, GRAMZA.com is the place to go. I'm only half joking when I say he breaks down about 30 to 50 products per video. He goes through pretty much everything that trades and has a bid over there at CME. So check it out, listeners. It's good stuff. As we also welcome on our next special guests. He has recovered from his technological issues, our old buddy, Mr. Brian Overby, a.k.a. the options guy at Ally Invest, a.k.a. the host of his own show, Options Playbook Radio. He's a busy guy. Mr. Overby, welcome to our election night spectacular, sir.
Well, I'm happy to make it, Mark. And I got to admit, my computer couldn't handle all the knowledge that was coming from the show. And right before we started, it just happened to crash. I've been on it all day long, nonstop, but 1 minute before we decided to join the show, just happened to crash. So I don't know if that's any sign about the election or anything to do with it, but I have been taking in a lot of the knowledge from the show, and I feel honored to be here with you guys.
Well, I appreciate that. Before I get your take on everything that's lighting it up, I know, Mr. Smith, you have to run as well. I appreciate you joining us here for an extended period of time on our election special. If you have any final nuggets you want to share with our audience, maybe about all things small cap, or perhaps you want to leave us with some more fun presidential trivia about Old Hickory, have at it, sir. The floor is yours.
Well, Mark, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. It's just a fantastic show, and I can't say enough about the guests and the talent on the show that was just previously mentioned, and just a real pleasure to be here and talk about the election and the markets and the outcome. I think we're all going to be up all night watching this. It's just a fantastic, incredibly historic time. And, the markets are speaking. But again, there's some uncertainty coming I'm pretty sure of it. So, keep your seatbelts on, everyone. And I will leave with just a couple more presidential tidbits for you. Here's one for you, Mark. Who was the first president that was a Boy Scout?
Was it Teddy Roosevelt? Sounds like a thing he would do.
You'd think Teddy Roosevelt, but it was actually John F. Kennedy.
Really? That late? Wow.
That late, yeah.
I know the Boy Scouts were around earlier than that. I guess it took a while to make their way. Look at you. I got your first one, and ever since then I've been batting zero here. Well done.
All right, here's one more for you. Since you mentioned Teddy Roosevelt, I'll just give you a tidbit of trivia on Teddy. Did you know he was blind in his left eye due to fighting in a boxing match?
Yes, he was another one who was a savage. Him and Andrew Jackson probably would have been buddies.
They would have been buddies or arm wrestling enemies.
Yes, or they would have fought to the death,
yeah.
one or the other.
Yeah. I think they would have both been standing if they shot each other.
That's probably true.
Exactly.
That's probably true. Well, thank you for all those nuggets, Mr. Smith, and we will talk to you again on Thursday, sir.
Keep the show going. Very exciting show. I'll be listening. Thank you again for having me, Mark. Always a pleasure. Take care.
Take care, sir. All right, Mr. Overby, sir, let's kick it off. With the question I've been asking everyone here tonight. Do you think we will have a victor by the end of this evening whenever my voice gives out? That'll be our line of demarcation there. And then B, what's been lighting up your tape? What are the folks been slinging over there in Ally Land, sir?
As far as the victor is concerned, I think somebody will call it before the end of the night. I don't know if they'll get it right, but they'll call it. Because there's just too much angst from all of the networks to want to be first with calling that projected winner. So that's my side on that question. And then what I had some interesting conversations today for the first time in a while. As you might know, I'm the senior options analyst with Ally Invest, and we have Options Playbook Radio. And I had my little webinar today. And it was the first time in a while that I've actually had a lot of people asking about the VIX index. I'm not saying that I went out and looked at the total volume, but I made it an open, you ask whatever you wanted to ask today. I don't always do that. I usually talk about strategies in general on my shows. But inside the Ally Invest platform, I actually opened it up and had some questions. And I had a lot of people asking about getting short the VIX. And I got to admit, this is the first time in a long time that people have actually asked about VIX options. And it always comes with a big, the first question is always, why are these option contracts on the put side trading more than the call side? And it has to do with the futures overall. I'm sure we'll discuss that a little bit. But I found that very interesting today that that was a main topic of conversation on my webinar that I was hosting today.
Interesting. That certainly jives with everything we've been seeing in the broad numbers. We were just talking about volatility views on Friday about how it's hard to find a sizable call strike in VIX right now. All the action, all the time is on the put. Speaking about volatility, we got another listener question. This one is from BZTK888. That screen's too far away from me. Hard to see all these names. He wants to know, what's the expected move for this Friday on the SPX? Mr. Short Vol, I know you're keeping track of the straddles out there for us. What's the S&P pricing in through the end of the week, sir?
Well, if I cheat on my Thinkorswim, it's showing an expected move of about 133 points on the SPX. But if I actually do the math, and I recommend people actually do the math on these things, obviously S&P options are closed right now, but the straddle's right around 120 points for the SPX, which I think seems, it seems pretty cheap. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. Obviously, stuff is going to get crushed not only for the dailies tomorrow, but stuff should come in. It's going to be a different number right on the open tomorrow. It will be down significantly. But the question is, how much do we gap tonight before that happens, if we do gap at all? Right now, we're not moving, but it is possible we gap one way or the other if we get some sort of result. Yeah. So, the answer is about $120 on the straddle right now.
Well, there you go. What was the listener's name? BZTK888. We have not very pronounceable handles out there in the audience today, but we love you all. Nonetheless, you're right, though, Dave. We aren't really moving a heck of a lot. We're staying glued around that 33 double or so level, 33.58 right now out there in the S&P. So just slightly below where we closed there, but also clearly off the highs we were just at not too long ago when Dan was breaking everything down and talking about how we might be threatening 3,400 to the upside these days out here. Not so much. Looks like we've got, let's see if we got any new states being added. I don't think we have any new states being added to the mix. It is interesting to see how the various outlets are proceeding on this front. Some are very low, that seems like, to call things. Others are kind of going back to the old school days of maybe 2000, where they were just kind of calling willy-nilly. So I have a bunch of different monitors going here in the studio, even some TVs showing some of the talking heads out there on the cable news, and they're all calling different numbers right now, which is kind of interesting. Which brings me to my question, which I forgot to ask you at the top of the show when you joined us here, Mr. Henry. Do you think we will have an outcome at the end of this evening, sir, in terms of who is the commander-in-chief?
Oh, it's a tough question. I do not think we will have an answer tonight. I think it's going to be a few days of stress and fighting, and I certainly hope that it doesn't drag out much longer than that. But I think that all the mail-ins are going to tie things up for a while. We'll see, though. Mark, I hope you will tweet out a picture of your command center with your multi-monitors and all your information sources.
I will, if I have a free hand to do so, I will try. I will endeavor to do just that. We are a little busy here with a legion of screens going out here, as you might imagine. Let's look here really quickly, since I got my Vol crew on with me. Let's dive in a little bit. I was looking at this right before we went live, kind of crunching the numbers. The nice thing about having been doing shows for the entirety of the year is we can kind of look back at the ebb and flow of volatility throughout the year. So let's do just that. Well, let's go back to middle of January. It seems like a lifetime ago now. The world was literally a different place back on January 10th when I pulled this data from, I believe this was our Volatility Views program. So on the 10th of January, obviously, pandemic was lurking. We had just come off the heels of all that insanity in the Middle East, and a little bit of vol was being priced in, but the VIX cash was at about a 12.25. Oh, what a distant number that seems like. And at the time, we started commenting even then about, it seemed like they're pricing a little bit of juice into these farther off futures, particularly around the election. At the time, with the VIX cash at about, 12.25 or so, they were pricing the October future already, even back then, at about a 20, so almost 8 points north. And the Nov future at about 18, almost 18.5. That puts it about 6.25 points. So even back then in January, they were pricing in a pretty healthy bump out there on on all things VIX futures. Then we get out here to, let's go to February 14th, an inauspicious day. That was the vol views before all hell really broke loose and the sell-off really started happening. At the time, the VIX cash was at a still comparatively quaint 14.25. The OC future at the time was at about a 1974, puts it about 5.5 points almost exactly in terms of premium. So still hefty, but not quite as much juice as they were pricing even into February. Of course, some of that can be attributed to the fact that the cash is creeping up a little bit there as well. A bit of a moving pivot point at the front of that curve. And the no future was just a tick under 18, about 17.95. So you're talking about almost 4 points, about 3.75 point premium to the cash. Fast forward to March, middle of March, we know what happened then. I don't have the exact date on when this is Friday, March 13th, so an inauspicious day, right before all the madness really, actually it was during the middle of it, but it really hit the apex of the downside. Sure, I should say really the nadir there, shortly thereafter. Coming into this show, a little bit of a different frame of reference. The VIX cash was at a 70.5. And the OC future was looking pretty juicy, 27.80, which actually isn't that bad compared to where we are right now. That isn't that bad of a prognostication. Again, coming into today's show, we weren't that far away from that. We were obviously a wee bit north of that, but not that far away from that. We were at about a 35 double or so. So not that bad. And then the no future was at about that's about a 42.75 point discount to the insanity that was the cash. And the no futures at about 26.16. That puts it about a 44.5 point discount. So that's just a little bit of a snapshot of how it was looking. Then, of course, coming into the big day of today, we took another final snapshot at midnight, heading into today, of how much juice was left. And as we kind of said earlier in the show, they sure squeezed a heck of a lot of that juice out, because coming into midnight here, coming into the beginning of election day itself, we saw the cash was at about 37.13 or so. It was about 4.25 points above where the no future was. That was about 32.90, about 4.5 points above the D's future, which was about 32.065, and about 6.6 points beyond that Jan futures at about 30.5. So interesting stuff out there, kind of a journey, a volatility journey, if you will, throughout the year. Mr. Rock Lobster, you've been on that journey with me throughout most of this year. What are your thoughts of this evolution of this election premium? You know, it was a wee little blip there at the beginning of the year, and then it started getting stronger. Then other things intervened, maybe took our attention away, but it was still there. And then it persisted and grew until they finally came for it and just sucked it dry over the past couple of weeks.
Well, you know, do you remember how we first saw it as sort of like a pimple? It was a pimple.
Yes.
It was a ripple
Yes.
on the vol surface.
I do believe, and it was in January we first noted it. I might have been even on the Advisors Option show with Matt, and I think Matt called it out and said, that election bump is way too high and should be sold immediately.
and it never stopped going up. And then, it's ebbed and flowed, but I think, as I recall in January, like, I'm going to say the peak of that vol was 22 or 23. And that felt pretty high because we were down in the 13, 14 handle before everything went crazy, right? So, you know, one thing about volatility is it reverts. So it can't go to zero. It's hard for it to stay at 100 and go forever because it's just hard for the market to do that historically. So part of this is like, where does vol go back to? And I think one of my my volisms is you get vol events in threes. So when you have macro events, the market can usually the market sort of sets up volatility for one thing to happen. Like, you know, you get a news event or something and you get a lift in vol, but there's always premium usually in options, right? Options generally just the vol is more expensive than where things are trading. But once you get two things or three things, that's when the vol starts to spill. Vol goes higher. You used to be trading. All of a sudden, you sold the straddle for $3. And as soon as you finished writing your ticket, the straddle's trading $5. You go, wait a minute. We don't have any of this priced right now. We better jack it up. So that it takes all those things to happen. So now I think we're at the point of the process where we're starting to take things away. COVID is here and it ain't going away. You don't hear about it everywhere else. You've heard about it in Europe. Apparently, they might be the only place running the whole thing worse than we are. However you want to take that. But, you know, the Europeans, all my students that are in Europe that talk to me every day, they're locking down all kinds of stuff. And I think that's what shot the vol up. Also, you know, we had the bid into the election, and the vol has to be bid because the straddle has to hold a value and the forward vol has to hold a value. So that there has to be a number that's there to support the projected move. You know, we're here now, you know, the results are coming out, and it's going to be hard for vol to stay there. So and if we talk about it on the show on Thursday on Option Block or even on Vol Views on Friday, huge put volume where people are finally saying, this is like, you know, I'm starting to see like sub 25. Remember, we've been in the zone of the danger zone for 6 months. We've only popped out of it for maybe 1 or 2 days, but we've never had a sustained change in the vol regime. When you trade vol, where you make the dough is when vol regime changes from high vol to low vol or low vol to high vol. And we've been stuck in this upper quartile for 6 months. So there's been a lot of back and forth. There isn't the big dough to be made in vol. You could catch some of the swings and stuff, but it's harder, right? It's a lot easier to make a lot of dough when you're buying vol when VIX is 12 and it goes to 20, just because the relative dollars are so much bigger, you know, because things only cost $1. Now when vol is in the, you know, the mid 20s or, you know, high 30s, you know, option contracts are expensive and you need the damn thing to move to make any money. So you've got different types of regimes for levels of volatility and the types of trades that you can do. So now all of a sudden, what's cheap? The 20 level puts in December, 25 puts in November. All that stuff started getting cheap again. The 25 put in November actually traded over $2 like a week and a half ago. And they're down to like 80 cents today. So there's like all of a sudden the low side of VIX, people are like, wait a minute, if this election comes out, we're going to get a president. The market already knows that Joe is going to be the other candidate, and it's been a toss-up for quite a while. So it has accepted that fact already, I think. So, and everybody kind of knows what Trump is at this point. Those are two big uncertainties that will be taking off. But like any trader that's been in a pit, you don't take the vol down until the event is over. And we still need this event to go down. Right now, I'm not seeing a lot of flutter in VXX, which is just basically buying the vol futures. So, I think the market could, I think SPX could drift up and down 50 points. It doesn't make any difference because VIX is already 36 or 35, right? It doesn't matter because it's already pricing in a 2% move per day on average. So if you look at this, like the fact that vol moves 2% after hours doesn't mean anything. It's already priced there. It's expected to do that. The big question is, what does it do, I think, over the next month? I've actually looked at like a bigger range, like some sort of awful news, which I still can't see how news could get worse, but always can.
I was going to say, is there more bad news?
I know. Like, I don't know what could come out. Always something, right? It's 2020. Every time we thought something was bad, you remember the Saudis saying, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make oil zero. Let's see how that works for everybody. Like, nobody saw that coming, right? VIX went to 100. So I don't think you could, the Flowmaster can talk about this, but it's hard to discount anything funky happening at this point. And also the way the market is, with what's going on. You could light a match and we could be at a 45 VIX tomorrow. But the fact that this election will be over, we will be closer to a resolution. I personally think it will be decided relatively soon. However, I would not bet my money on the NOV 6 cycle. I would prefer to go to the NOV 13 or D4 cycle to bet money because, who the heck knows, right? A lot of funk could happen. But that's kind of where I see this as I bow out and let some of the other co-hosts pop on. I do see vol going down, and I do think by the end of 2020 we will get into zone 3 by the end of the year because we're just going to be used to having the COVID. It's not going away. Asia's figured out how to deal with it. You don't hear anything about some of the other big continents. Or like South America, what's going on? India, the subcontinent, what's going on? Africa, you don't hear anything from. So, once this election gets out of the news cycle, you'll start hearing about other stuff going on and see if we can get some sort of, let's just say we'll just get used to the weirdness until they find a vaccine or something. I think and then the vaccine would probably be the thing that drive VIX probably sub 16. I don't think we do that until we actually have something like that where people are a little more confident. So I think that's the vol regime. There's been massive, massive buying in those puts. Brian was actually saying people are talking about VIX because they're like, why is this so high? There's a reason, but there's also been massive buying of late. There wasn't massive buying 3 weeks ago, but there's starting to be massive buying now. So the listeners can take that whether they think. I'm leaning kind of short vol. I do have some upside, kind of what I would call an explosion contract, more like around 3,000 SPX in case things get really nasty. But, I just would expect vol to kind of peter out here. So we'll see. That's the fun of trading. You get to see what it's going to be like tomorrow.
That is the fun of trading. Well said, Mr. Rock Lobster. Speaking of saying things, we've got K Miller 501 in the chat. He says, first time in the chat. Guidance from many of these voices has helped me to step up my investing game and start making smart money moves. This is my first time hearing you do a special event. Interesting stuff. Keep it up. Kev from Texas. Well, thank you very much Kev from Texas, I appreciate that. You're right. This is the first time we've done a special event like this, and I think judging by the feedback, I think we'll do some more. Mr. Rock Lobster, we have to add some more people there. I know you have to hop out to go fight off those clam pirates. Any last nuggets you want to leave our audience with before you go, sir?
Yeah, I think, just remember the low in the cycle was 23.5 VIX. That's about the lowest number we saw. So in order for us to get lower than that, we would have to break through with some kind of other positive news. So, if you're trying to find a range, we're currently in the mid-30s for the cash. Maybe low 20s would be the low. I think it's you'd be a little bit of you'd be smoking the hopium if you thought you could get to the teens in the month of November. That's all I'm saying for the vol, for VIX.
A little bit of hopium goes a long way. I appreciate that, Mr. Rock Lobster. Head on back now to your palatial compound.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.